Right. As I already mentioned, there are two ways we can do software development. One approach is called structured programming. That is what we have been doing so far until the last session. Uh, we look at the data, we represent the data into variables and then process it. How do we process it? By applying operations using control structures. Okay. So it's a very simple approach, very straightforward approach. Anyone can easily learn it. Right? So that is called structured programming, structured software development. So today what we look at is object-oriented software development. So there the thinking is different. And the other thing is object-oriented programming is not a replacement for structured programming. Rather, object-oriented programming is an enhancement for structured programming. So therefore, when you do object-oriented programming, it doesn't mean that you forget about the structured programming in object orientation. You need all these concepts. But high level, we think in terms of object-oriented concepts. Okay, high level. But when you're really developing it, still need to apply operators, we need to use control structures, and so on. Okay, right. So therefore, this is slightly different but supplementary approach. Okay, and if you take commercial software development, more than I would say 80% of software development is object oriented. But in that, when we say object oriented, it doesn't mean that you don't do any structured code. Of course, we do. But overall, object oriented. I would say 80% or sometimes even 90%. So therefore, if you don't understand object-oriented programming, you can't survive, especially in software development field. Maybe you can survive in other fields like quality assurance, project management, system engineering, and so on, networking, but definitely not in software development. Okay. So therefore, if you want to get into the software development field, understanding and getting the confidence, building confidence of object orientation is super, super critical. Okay. Right. So what? How do you look at object-oriented software development? So here we look at software development as we have data. You can take it to variables and do processing, apply operations using control structures till you get the result to expected output for the information. Here, how do you look at it is, we look at the system as set of objects that communicate and collaborate. So why do those objects communicate and collaborate? To achieve the common objectives. And when you think like that and develop the system, we say that we are doing object-oriented software development. Set of objects communicate and collaborate to perform the system functionality, so achieve the objectives. So if you can understand how this is done, so that means you know how to do so object-oriented design and development. Okay. Right. As I told you, this is an alternative approach. So this approach was first introduced in 1980s and latter part of 1970s. So therefore, before object-oriented came, people had been doing programming using structured approach from 1960s, structured development. But in 1980s, so this approach also introduced. Okay. And these days, this approach is very, very popular. Okay. Very, very popular as a supplementary to the structured programming. Okay. So if you consider the all programming languages like Pascal, C, okay, COBOL, so those languages, they never supported object-oriented because at that time no one was doing object-oriented programming. But with especially C++ language, C is also structured programming language. Using C language, you can't do object-oriented programming. But then came the C++ language. So C++ supported object-oriented programming in a serious manner. And then Java language added super serious attention to the object-oriented programming. And then, of course, the C Sharp, Python, PHP, all these languages also start supporting object-oriented concepts. Okay. And so that is a little bit of how the evolution happened. Okay. Right. So this is a one-to-one comparison between structured development and object-oriented development. Again, I want you to spend a lot of time with this session or with this topic, understanding what is structured development, what is object-oriented. Because a lot of students, when we say object-oriented programming, they think there's no other life other than inheritance. Inheritance is object-oriented programming. No, inheritance is something very tiny part of object-oriented programming. Most of the time, you don't use inheritance much. Your software, you will be using more other object-oriented concepts. Okay. So here we think in terms of control structures. Here we think in terms of objects and their interactions. That is why we call it object-oriented programming. So this is a very basic approach. Even kids can understand. You know that even kids can do software development, programming, structured programming, even grade 6, 7 students. But we don't teach them the object-oriented approach because it's too much for them. So this is relatively simple. This is relatively complex. Relatively, okay. It doesn't mean that this is impossible thing. And using structured development, you can develop it faster. Of course, if it is a simple problem. For simple problems, if you want to develop a solution fast, use structured. Because object-oriented programming need little bit more time, little bit of more analysis, design before start coding. But structured programming, quickly you can go to coding. So therefore, when you have a simple problem that you need a quick solution, you can use structure. But the code is less maintainable and reusable if you use structured approach. But if you use object-oriented approach, though it takes a little bit more time, effort, your solution is more reusable, maintainable. So that is what we need in commercial software development in most of the time. Long term, we want to maintain the software, add some changes, enhancements. Okay. So therefore, if you need to develop a simple system, quickly go for structure. But if you want to develop a complex system with long-term modifications and so on in mind, it's worth develop it using object-oriented ways. It will take more time, but that is going to pay off later. Okay. So at any time, if you have any question, you can ask. Okay. So I'm really disappointed with these students these days because they don't ask questions. They don't ask good questions. Okay. Because when we studied, of course, we studied in 1990s. So we used to ask a lot of questions. Okay. We had a lot of questions to clarify because we were very proactive. We were eager to learn. So that eagerness, I don't know, somehow it has been lost. Okay. Some people, they just study for the sake of study for the sake of getting the certificate. They don't think about their careers. They don't think about their future much, unfortunately. Okay. So when we studied, we first thought about our career, what we want to do in the future. Then we wanted to get the competencies to do that. So that is why we studied. Okay. Right. So these are the things that you must understand if you want to do object-oriented programming. So you need to understand the basics of object orientation. What is an object? What is a class? What is a message? What is association relationship? So once you understand these things, you can go to the core concepts like abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism. So once you have reasonable confidence about these concepts, then you can think of what is open close principle, what is inversion of control, what are the design patterns. Okay. So in semester one, we look at the basics and concepts for core concepts, but we don't look at advanced concepts. So that is for your semester 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 topics. Okay. So we will cover the basics and core concepts. Okay. First, we will look at the basics. Right. So if you want to develop the software in object-oriented manner, so you need to think in terms of object-oriented concept from the analysis. Of course, preliminary investigation and planning, it's common with the structured object-oriented. But if you decide to do object-oriented manner, you better do object-oriented analysis. That means when you analyze also, you as much as possible you think in terms of objects and related concepts. That will be really productive, beneficial. But if you're planning to do structured development, maybe you can think structured manner from analysis itself. Then when you do the designing, obviously you need to do object-oriented design. That is obvious, right? Because what you design is what you develop. And obviously when you do the development, use object-oriented concepts and code it. Testing is usually there's no difference between structured or whatever. But especially when you're doing unit testing, again, you can think a little bit in terms of objects, but other than that, testing is testing. So testing means pretty much your system testing, integration testing, user acceptance testing. So there it doesn't matter much whether it's structured way you develop or object-oriented way. Okay. But definitely analysis, design, development, right? For example, in semester 3, you have subject called object-oriented analysis and design. So basically, we are looking at these two aspects in more details in semester 3 again as a one subject. Because in this semester, programming subject, we are more interested in this object-oriented development. But little bit of design and analysis. But you have full subject in semester 3 to 100% concentrate on analysis and design using object orientation. Because this is very important. Right. So now let's move on to the object-oriented basics. For the basic concepts behind object-oriented programming, software development. So if you don't know the basics, remember for the batch 5, today we did logic. So we discuss in detail what is logic, what is Boolean logic, and what is a set, what is a empty set, what is universal set, what is a proposition, what is simple proposition, what is a composite proposition. So those are the basics, right? If you don't know the basics, you will not understand anything or you will not do any productive thing. So similarly, if you don't understand the basics, you will never ever do productive thing using object-oriented programming. Okay. So therefore, be very serious about your basics. Right. So what are the basic concepts of in object-oriented software development? Concept called object and class are highly related, but two different concepts. Okay. So then the concept called messaging and the concept called association. So those are the very basics, like ABC when you learn a language. Okay. So without understanding these things, you will never be able to understand the other concepts and start developing software. So again, when you learn basics, you must have very precise definitions. And you must be able to explain it the most simplest, okay, shortest, complete manner. So therefore, be dead serious about the definitions of what is object, what is a class, what is messaging, what is association. Dead serious. So then you will be really confident about your concepts and you will start doing things with that because you're confident. So why don't you feel like developing a software? Maybe you are not confident about how to do it, or maybe you are lazy. Or maybe you don't like it. Of course, if you don't like it, don't do IT. Okay. So find something you like and do it as long as you can earn also. Okay. Right. So let's move on to the first concept. Actually, we do take two concepts together, objects and classes. Remember, how do we look at the system? Look at a system in object-oriented programming. Set of objects communicate and collaborate. Right? Communicate and collaborate. Uh, why? Because then only they can achieve the objectives. Right? Achieve the objectives. So these objects communicate and collaborate in order to achieve the objectives. Okay. Right. So that is the big picture you must have. It is not you represent data in variables and then apply operations to do processing. No, that is not the way we look at it now. Okay. Right. What is mean by object? Because in object-oriented programming, the approach itself has the word object. So in object-oriented software development, object is anything that we are interested, relevant to the system. So this is, you can see this definition is very close to the definition we gave to entities. Remember, entity is anything that you are interested. Data is a property of an entity. Information is processed data. Entity is anything that we are interested, right? Living physical entities, non-living physical entities, conceptual entities. So here, when we say object, that is also pretty much the same thing. Anything that we are interested, relevant to the system. Okay. But when it comes to object, when we say entity, we are only interested in data. But when we say object, we are interested in not only the data related to that entity, its behaviors. That is the difference when it comes to database and object-oriented programming. Same concept, we look at it in slightly different way. Or when we look at it as objects, we pay attention not only to the data, but also to the behaviors or methods. Okay. So that means your object has both attributes and behaviors. Attributes and behaviors. Okay. And therefore, again, as usual, your object can be living physical thing, non-living physical thing like vehicle, or conceptual thing like order, payment, registration, and so on, reservation. Right. So as I told you, when we say object, object is an entity, something that is important for us. We are interested in that. We are interested in two things about object. That is, what are the attributes or properties of that object or entity? What are the behaviors or services of that entity or object? Okay. So let's look at a very practical thing. Forget about the software development. Say you consider there's an entity or object, okay, called maybe Nimal. Nimal is a person or student or boy. Now, what are the attributes we are interested? Maybe the name, of course, the name itself is Nimal. Maybe date of birth, gender, and so on. So those are attributes or properties of that object. So then there are behaviors of that object. For example, Nimal can run, Nimal can laugh, Nimal can talk. Those are the behaviors of that object. So when we look at object, we look at both, we are interested in both attributes and behaviors of that object. Okay. The other thing is there can be different objects. And also there can be different objects of same type. different object types and different number of instances of each and every type. For example, if you look at an office or something, so you will say there's a security object, maybe one or two, manage object, operator objects, maybe some other objects also. And each object has, or set of objects have its own attributes, properties. So attributes or properties, behaviors or services. So we need to model both for object. Okay. Right. So then what is mean by, so attribute is a property of an object. Okay. Like name of a student, contact number of a student. Or it can be a state. Okay. If it is a bank account, whether it's active, suspended, those are also attributes. States are also attributes. So then behaviors are functionalities or services that object can provide. So think in a very practical manner, okay? Like real world. So there's a object. So object can have its own attributes and some behaviors. Okay. So those are the two things that we are interested when it comes to an object. Okay, when it comes to an object. Again, if you have any questions, you need to ask question or if you need to clarify anything. Right. So this is how you model a object or class. Now, first of all, you need to understand the difference between class and object. Okay, class and object. So object is anything that we are interested relevant to the system. So then what is a class? Class represents or models similar objects. Okay. Class represents or models similar objects. So therefore, our system may have so many objects, but our software will have only few classes. Maybe these set of objects are having same set of attributes and same set of behaviors. Maybe these are different type of objects. And maybe these are another different type of objects, say vehicle or something. And these are different type of objects. These are different type of objects. And these are different type of. If you have different type of objects, you need to represent those objects using a class. Class. So there's a connection between class and object also. And there's a big similarity also. Object is an individual instance, say Nimal, Kamal. Class represent all these objects, like a student class. Nimal and Kamal are objects of that class. Okay. So remember, we are interested in two things about objects, attributes and behaviors. So when it comes to class, because class represent set of similar objects, or class models set of similar objects. To represent all the account objects, you can create a account class. To create all the student objects, you can create a student class. So if student object has attributes and behaviors, so those attributes and behaviors must be modeled in your class as well. Okay. So therefore, your class can have the class name, your attributes and behaviors separately. Okay. So therefore, class and objects are two different things, but highly related. Highly related. Group of objects or class is a typical lie. Typical lie that you may have learned, not only you, a lot of students learn it like that. Right? So why do we say that group of object is not a class? So that also you need to understand. Okay. Are entity and object the same or entity and class the same? So the simple answer is these three are related, but three different things. Big connection is there. Big connection is there, but three different things. But entity is more related to, again, the way you look at it, it depends. Okay. The way you look at it depends. Anyway, I'll explain it again. But let's first finish this question of whether class is a group of objects. So the simple answer is class is not a group of objects. Okay. Why? I will explain it after I give you the definition of what is class. Still, I have not given you the definition of class. Object is anything that we are interested, like anything that we are interested, like student object, account object, employee object, payment object, order object, vehicle object. Okay. Object is anything that we are interested related to our system or functionalities. So therefore, objects can be living physical things like student, employee, customer, non-living physical things like a vehicle, machinery, goods, or conceptual things like payment, order, account, reservation, registration, course. Okay. Okay. So now do you have understanding about what is object is? Object is anything that you are interested related to the system. And that object can have attributes and behaviors. For example, if you take student object, student name, student's date of birth, student's contact number, those are attributes of the student. Student's behaviors, of course, you need to look at things related to your system. Of course, student can sing, student can laugh, student can eat, student can run. Yes, we know, but those are not related to us, our system. Maybe we are interested in student management system. So then we don't track whether the student sings, sleep, eat, or whatever, right? So can someone tell me what are the some behaviors of a student? Maybe we are interested if you are managing student management or if you are building a student management system. So we model only related things. Anyone? Attributes I mentioned, like student's name, student's contact number, student's ID, behaviors that we are interested if you are doing a student management system. Anyone? That means we are not interested about the students. Education qualification is not a behavior. First of all, you must understand what is meant by behavior. Behavior කියන්නේ නානවා, hina වෙනවා, දුවනවා. Qualification එකක් කියන්නේ behavior එකක් නෙමෙයි. හැසිරීමක් නෙමෙයි. Yes, attendance rate. Attendance rate is not a behavior. Attendance rate කියන්නේ behavior එකක් නෙමෙයි. Behaviors කියන්නේ මොනවාද? Registration. Yes, maybe yes. Register. Student come and register for a course. That is a behavior. Student කෙනෙක් ඇවිල්ලා කියන මේ මට මේක මෙන්න මේ course එක register වෙන්න ඕන. අන්න behavior. Right? So that is an answer. Register behavior. Okay. But loosely calling, yes, but it's also not really, but loosely calling, yes. Registration is a behavior of student, or more likely we can take it. What are the other behaviors as a institute? Maybe we are interested. Say, forget about the institute, school. What are the behaviors your school is interested about the students? Takara කියන මට වැඩි හිතන්න එපා. සාමාන්‍ය දැනි පාවිච්චි කරන්න. physical fitness කියන්නේ behavior එකක්ද? fitness කියන්නේ noun එකක්. nouns කොහොමද behaviors වෙන්නේ? behaviors කියන්නේ වගේ හැසිරීම. අමු සිංහලෙන් කියන්නද? ඔයා ඉස්කෝලේට ආවද කියන එක ගැන ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට්ද? ආවද නැද්ද? උදේට නම් ලකුණු කරන්නේ නැහැ. මේක ආවද නැද්ද කියලා හොයාගන්නවා. හරි. behavior එකක්. ආවද whether you attend the school or not. ඒක track කරන්න ඕනද මොකද? උදේට register කරලා නම් මාක් කරනවා. So attend the school is a behavior they are interested. Okay. Maybe you have attended the exam. නේද? ඔයාගෙන් අසනකුත් ගන්නවා නේද? විභාගේ දවසට ආවා කියලා. admission කොලේ අරගෙන. That is a behavior they are interested. They are interested. They want to track it. If it is employee, again, whether you attend or leave. යනකොටත් අර කාඩ් ඇඟිලි මාක් එක තියලා යනවා නේද? අන්න ගියා කියන behavior එක track කරනවා. ආවා කියන behavior එක track කරනවා. If it is employee management system, right, they are interested whether you take a leave. නේද? ඒක දැක්කේ leave එකක් ගන්නවා නම් form එක approval ගෙනල්ලා දෙන්න කියලා. එහෙම නැත්නම් online apply කරන්න කියලා. So those are the behaviors. Okay? Those are the behaviors. So therefore, your class objects can have both attributes and behaviors. It's easy to understand the behaviors. Of course, it's usually easy to understand the attributes of any type of object, whether living physical or non-living physical or conceptual. Right? For example, you can think of some attributes of a non-living physical object like vehicle, maybe vehicle number, vehicle color, mileage, registration number. I hope you can easily understand attributes of a conceptual object. Object means it's a serious stuff. Object is another name for object is entity instance. Okay. So can you give me some attributes of a conceptual object? Let's call it order. ඔයගොල්ලෝ කියන attributes ටික මෙයාගේ. Order instances තියෙනවා මම මේ. හරි. නිමල් දාපු order එක, කමල් දාපු order එක. What are the attributes you may be interested? Yes, order number. What else? Order number. What else? Yeah, order quantity. Okay, quantity or maybe individual items quantity, right? Okay, so it's order items attribute actually. Anyway, let's say it's just one type of object things you are buying, right? Maybe the order date, right? Order date. Maybe order type. It's a you need express delivery or normal order. Right? Order number, order date, order type. Okay, so those are things that, yeah, maybe delivery address, yes, and delivery address. So those are some attributes, right? Payment method. Payment method, maybe yes. Maybe yes. Okay, payment method. Right. So now let's take another example. Account. I mean, when I say account, bank account, okay? What are the attributes that you are interested? Because it's a conceptual object. Account is a concept, right? Bank, you have concept called account. Can you give me some examples for attributes? Yes, balance, account number, type of account. Yes, type of account. Yeah, maybe last payment date. NIC number is not a attribute of account. So that is another confusion. NIC number is not an attribute of account. NIC number is the attribute of the account holder. Account holder. Oh, maybe currency, yes, that is a good one. Currency. Some accounts you keep it in Sri Lankan rupees. Some accounts you keep your money in dollar. Yes, those are attributes of account. Yes, account type, whether it's a savings account, uh, current account, and so on. Correct. So all are correct. Okay. But a holder's name, not a property of account. It's more property of the account holder. Account holder is a different object. Right. So then tell me what are the behaviors of account? Behaviors. Can and conceptual thing have behaviors? Behaviors තියෙන concept එක. If you just look at it as a normal way, no. Concept එකකට behaviors තියෙන බෑ. අන්න physical දෙයකට behaviors තියෙන බෑ සාමාන්‍ය නේද? Physical දෙයක් කොහෙත් තැබ්බ වගේ තියෙනවා තිබ්බ තැන. But in object orientation, the way you look at it, your physical objects also have behaviors, conceptual things also have behaviors. So that means you look at the objects in a slightly different way than you look at it in real world. That is why initially it will take some time. That is why these things are not taught in schools, even in A level. Right? For example, you need to think like your account have behavior called deposit, withdraw, add interest. Okay, add interest. Those are considered as behaviors of the account class or the account object. Okay, behaviors. At first, you may get confused. At first, you may feel like that doesn't make sense. That is perfectly okay. But this is slightly different way of thinking. We are not just looking at the reality as a no ordinary person. We are looking at according to the object-oriented software development philosophy. So then you need to think like your account has behaviors also. Deposit, withdraw, add interest, money transfer. Okay. And if you take order, make an order, cancel an order. Okay. Maybe dispatch the order. That is, goods are delivered. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking. Okay. Right. So therefore, your objects are the things that we are interested in the system, like account objects, payment objects, customer objects. Okay. Then your objects have attributes and behaviors. Okay. Different objects have different attributes and behaviors. Okay. Then what is a class? So your system has so many objects, so many account objects, so many payment objects, customer objects, student objects, depending on your system. Okay. Teacher objects, course objects. So then what is a class? So class models, right? This is the definition, the perfect definition. I can. So object is anything that we are interested about related to the system. And objects can have attributes and behaviors. Objects can be living physical, non-living physical, conceptual. There can be multiple objects of same type. So many different customer objects, so many different account objects, so many different student objects, so many different payment objects. So then what is a class? Class models or represents set of similar objects. That is the definition of class. What is a class? Class represents or models set of similar objects. Objects of same type. So if they have, maybe you have thousands of objects of same type. To represent all those thousands of objects of the same type, you model a class. If you take a banking system, to represent all the accounts, you have account class. To represent all the students, you have a student class. To represent all the customers, customer class. To represent all the orders, order class. To represent all the payments, payment class. Okay. So what is the definition of class? Class models or represents set of objects. Similar objects. So not set of all the similar objects. Not just set. Okay. So if you have that kind of object, that is represented by this particular class. You don't need two classes for that. Okay. What is the difference between set and group? It is not the difference between set and group, the way you present the answer. So earlier the question answer was class is group of objects. Okay. Class is group of object. But this definition is not class is set of objects. Right. Class is group of objects. So if you like to keep the word group, okay, class models, right? Not class is. Class is කියන එකේ class models කියන එකේ කතන්දර දෙකක් තියෙනවා. Class models, group of, set of, or all of similar objects. All of the similar objects. To represent all these objects of same type, we models a class. To represent කරනවා කියන්නේ group කරනවා කියන එක නෙමෙයි. දැන් ඔයාලකව මේ බිත්තර ටිකක් තියුණත් එහෙම. මේ බිත්තර හතර වලට group කරන්න පුළුවන්, මල්ලකට දාන්න පුළුවන්. So then you have group of eggs. මෙහෙම නැත්නම් මෙහෙම ආගාව තියෙනවා කාර් තුනක්. ඔය කාර් තුනම group කරනවා. So but that is not a group class, car class. That is group of class. Group of cars. Group of cars කියන්නේ group of cars කියන්නේ car class එක නෙමෙයි. කොහෙත්ම නැත. That is just group of cars. Or group of cars, group of students. අපි ස්ටුඩන්ට්ලා පස්සේ හැදෙන්නේ කයියක් ගහන් ඉන්නවා. So that is group of students. But group of student is not a group class. The student class. Student class is not group of students. Student class models or represents all the students in the system. So it's models, represents. It's not group. Group කරනවා කියන්නේ අල්ලලා මල්ලකට දාගන්නවා. නැත්තම් අල්ලලා ගැට ගන්නවා. කොටු කරනවා. Class is not doing like that. Class models or represents set of or all of the similar objects of that type. To represent all the accounts, you can model account class. To represent all the customers, you need customer class. To represent all the orders, you need order class. To represent all the payments, you need payment class. Represent all models. Okay. So it is not just you group them, put it into a basket and say this is bitter පහ basket එකට දාලා මේක bitter class එක කියන්නේ නැහැ. bitter class එකේ bitter එකක්වත් නැහැ. මොකද එයා concept එක. It's models. That is why group of objects is class is wrong answer. Okay. ගොඩක් අයට වෙන්නේ අර ස්ටුඩන්ට්ලා ටිකක් එකතු කරාම ඔයගොල්ලන්ට හිතන class එකක් කියලා. නේද? ඔය කතන්දරේ එන්නේ ඒකයි ගොඩක් අයට. So when there are about say 30 students in a physical building, so we call it class. නේද? ගොඩක් අය හිතනවා ඔන්නෝකම තමයි object oriented වල class එකක් කියන්නේ කියලා. මොකද ඔයාලට පේනවනේ මේ ස්ටුඩන්ට්ලා 20ක් 30ක් එකට කොටු කරාට පස්සේ class එකක් කියලා. But that is a different story. Just we use the same word, but here completely different meaning. So there yes, class is collection of students, but here class is not collection of objects or group of objects. Class models all of the objects of the similar type. So that is why for one type of objects you have one class, another type of objects you have another class. Okay. And since objects have attributes and behaviors, and we want to model objects using the class. So therefore, your class also must model attributes and behaviors. So your class must have a name. Then you define what are the attributes of that class. That means what are the attributes of the objects having you that you represent, and what are the behaviors of that class. So that what are the behaviors of the objects of that class. Okay. So any questions, anything not clear, anything that you want to get it more clarification, or anything that you don't agree with me, that is also fine, right? Because this is higher education, maybe school and if you feel like no, that is contradicting with my understanding, I still feel like that definition has a bug, or it's there's something wrong with that, we can discuss. Okay. Is that in object oriented programming, objects can be here and there. What do you mean by here and there? But they are set into similar attributes and behaviors. They are set into, your question is not very clear. In a way, yes, objects can be here and there, right? But remember, in software, everything is a concept. Even student is a concept. Vehicle is a concept. So then in object-oriented software, objects are in your servers, memory. But actually those objects represent real-world things. Maybe real-world students, real-world payments, real-world orders. Therefore, I'm not very sure what you mean by here and there, because if you look at the software, ultimately all the objects are created in the computer memory. But reality, yes, if you look at the physical world, here and there. But we identify that all of the similar objects are represented by a particular class. Okay, particular class. So this is how you model a class. You give it a name, then you list down all the attributes, then you list down all the behaviors of that class or behaviors of the objects of that class. These are the attributes of the object of that class. Every employee can have its own employee number, date of birth, post, salary. Then these are some possible behaviors: check in, check out, promote, terminate, appoint. Okay. So then someone will ask, how does employee appoint? Employee appoint කරන්නේ employee නෙමෙයිනේ. ඒකත් අර account එකට සල්ලි දාන්නේ අපි තමයි. Yes, customer deposit, but we consider deposit as a behavior of the, not the customer. We consider deposit as a behavior of the account. So ඕන්නක තමයි මුලින් තේරුම් ගන්න අමාරු වෙන්නේ. ඔතන තමයි හිර වෙන්නේ කට්ටිය. ඒක ඒක වෙනස් කියලා තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා. For example, if you take a vehicle, you can easily understand the attributes. Okay, you can easily understand attribute. මම අහුව ගමන් කියන ඔක්කොම attribute set එක. Vehicle color, vehicle type, vehicle mileage, okay, registration number, engine capacity. If you take engine also part of the vehicle, number of seats, number of passenger capacity, ඔක්කොම මට කියනවා. හැබැයි behaviors have, like, can someone tell me what are the behaviors of a car? මට කියන්න behaviors ටිකක් car එකේ තියෙන. Just tell me 5 behaviors of a car. Behaviors, speed is not a behavior. Okay, speed is attribute actually. Breakdown. Okay, positive පැත්තකින් පටන් ගමුකෝ නේද? එකපාර break down කරන්නේ නැතුව ඒක වල. Right, maybe start. Start is a behavior of the car. Someone might argue that start is not the behavior of the car. Start is a behavior of the driver. එහෙම කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන් ඕන නේ. නේද? අයි driver නේ වෙලා start කරන්නේ. නෑ. driver ඇවිල්ලා behavior එක call කරනවා. Start කියන behavior එක තියෙන්නේ වාහනේ ඇතුලේ. Right? Start motor එක මේව කරලා engine එක start වෙනවා නේද? එහෙනම් start behavior එක තියෙන්නේ වාහනේ. Right? So start behavior is behavior of the car. Right? What else? Accelerate. Yes, accelerate. What else? තාම මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? කාර් එකේ තියෙන behaviors. ඒ behaviors driver ට call කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක තමයි messaging කියන්නේ. නේද? යතුරු කරකවනවා. නැත්තම් push button එක ඔබනවා. Accelerate අර acceleration pedal එක පාගනවා. So that is the behavior of the car. Driver call it. Turning. ඔය තියෙන්නේ. driver call it. driver තමයි අර සුක්කානම නේද? steering wheel එක කරකවන්නේ. හැබැයි එතකොට so the car has that behavior. So driver just call it. Now you should understand this, okay? Right. Horning. Horn කරනවා. horn එක තියෙන්නේ එයාගේ behavior එකක්. අපිට තියෙන horn behavior එක call කරනවා. Okay. And even stop. Brake pedal is there. Okay. Airbag is not a behavior. Maybe activating the airbag is a behavior. Okay. So likewise, now you can see that though you feel it like these are the behavior of the driver, actually driver does just call those behaviors. Driver just call these behaviors, right? So similarly, in bank account, deposit, withdraw are behaviors of the account, and we just call those behaviors. Okay. Another way of understanding behaviors is when a particular behavior is called, usually these attributes can change. For example, when someone calls the accelerate behavior, speed will change. Something like that. When someone calls the deposit behavior, its balance can change. You can see these behaviors can change your attributes, some attributes. Okay. ඒක හරියට අපි කනකොට බඩගින්න අඩු වෙනවා. කනවා කියන behavior කරනකොට බඩගින්න නැති වෙනවා. නැත්නම් ඇඟේ තියෙන ග්ලූකෝස් ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි වෙනවා. ඒ behavior එක තියෙන මගේ තියෙන attribute එකක් වෙනස් වෙනවා. So it's not easy, right? And this is the most important thing to understand. This is the most important thing, not polymorphism or inheritance or somewhere else. What students do is they just skip this and they go there and think. එතනට ගිහලා අමුඩ ගහගෙන කල්පනා කරනවා. polymorphism කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? interface කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? හැබැයි මෙතන තේරුම් අරන් නැතුව එතන ගිහිල්ලා අවුරුදු 50ක් කල්පනා කරලා තේරුම් ගන්න නැහැ. ෆයිනල් ඉයර් ස්ටුඩන්ට් එකෙන් අහලා බලන්න ෆයිනල් ඉයර් ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා. අවංකව කතා කරන එක කියයි මට මේ ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක කරනවානේ ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක අගම් මුලක් හොයාගන්න බැරුව ඉන්නේ කියලා software එක ඔතනින් පටන් ගන්නවාද ඩෙවලොප් කරන්න කියලා. ඔක තමයි ඇත්ත කතන්දරේ. අගම් මුල පටන් ගන්න නැත්තේ මොකද මෙතන තමයි මුල තියෙන්නේ. මේ මුල ගැන හිතන්නේ නැහැ. විභාග ලඟ වුණාම ගොඩ දා ගන්නවා. හරි එහෙම කියන්නේ නේද? ගොඩ දා ගන්නවා අන්තිමට software එකක් හදන්නත් බෑ, ඉන්ටර්වියු එකට යන්නත් බෑ, මුකුත් බෑ. Right. So as I told you, there can be some confusion. So your task is get out of the confusions, not stay with the confusions. One confusion is, should it be an attribute of this object or some other objects which is related to this object? So remember, one of you told me card holder or card holder's name or the account holder's name is attribute of account. But in reality, account holder's name is not attribute of account. Account holder's name is attribute of account holder class or the account holder object. සමහරවිට ඔයා හිතනවා අර ඔයාගේ account book එකේ නම තියෙන හන්ද ATM credit card නැත්නම් card එකේ නම තියෙන හන්ද ඒක account එකට අදාළ දෙයක් නෑ. ඒ card එකට ඕන කරලා ලියන්න පුළුවන් ඒක බැංකුවේ නමක් තියෙන්නේ. So therefore you must know exactly whether it's attribute of this class or that class, whether it's a behavior of this class or that class, right? So therefore, start is not a behavior of the driver. Start is the behavior of the vehicle. Deposit is not the behavior of the customer. Deposit is a behavior of the account. Okay, so that is how you need to think. Otherwise, you can't develop it. හැබැයි ඔයාලට හිතන්න පුළුවන් ඩ්‍රයිවර් කී බිහේවියර් එකක් තමයි කියලා. එහෙම හිතුවා කියලා වැරද්දක් නැහැ. නමුත් ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් ඔරියන්ටඩ් සොෆ්ට්වෙයාර් ඩෙවලොප් කරද්දී එහෙම හිතන්න බෑ. එතකොට ඔයාලට ඕක ඩෙවලොප් කරගන්න බෑ. මොකද ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් ඔරියන්ටඩ් ඩෙවලොප් කරන්න ඕන විදියක් තියෙනවා. Okay. So should it be a behavior of object A or object B? So, so initially you need to get out of these confusions with some solid examples. Okay. Right. We already discussed this. Should start and drive and stop behaviors of the car or driver. Those should be behaviors of the car, not the driver. Driver can call them, message them. Okay. Invoke those behaviors. Okay. So you must be very, very, very sure about those things. Okay. Otherwise, that confusion will stay forever. As long as you have those confusions, you can't start doing development, programming, because you are confused. You are not very sure what is going on, how to do the coding, because you don't know whether that is a behavior of X class or Y class. Should I put it into X class? Should I put it into Y class? ඔන්න දැන් අග මුලක් ඔක්කොම අනා ගන්නවා එකක්. Again, I am telling you, if you ask final year students, majority will say we don't know how to start the coding because they are not confident. මම කියන්නේ දර එක අද උදේට කිව්වම නෑ කලින් ක්ලාස් එකේ. When it comes to medicine, even 3AC is not good enough. ඒ තුනක් මදි. Because this guy might kill patients. හැබැයි BIT කරද්දි නැත්නම් ඔයාලට ඕන ඔය ස්ට්‍රිප් එකේ හරි ඕන එකක තියෙන ඩිග්‍රී එකට ගන්න S තුනෙන් ගන්න. 3S passes. ඇයි ඒ? ඔය S තුනක් අරගෙන ආවා කියලා ඔයා ඔයාගේ කැපැසිටි එක වැඩි කරගත්තේ නැත්නම් ඔයාලට software develop කරන්නත් බෑ. මෙලෝ මගුලක් කරන්න බෑ. එතකොට ඔයාලට එහෙම මුකුත් මෙලෝ මගුලක් කරන්න බැරි නම් ඩිග්‍රියක් තියෙන කියලා කවුරුත් ගණන් ගන්නවද? කවුරුත් ගණන් ගන්නෑ. ආණ්ඩුව විතරයි ගණන් ගන්නේ. ආණ්ඩුව විතරයි ගණන් ගන්නේ. ඒක අද ආණ්ඩුව පම්පලොත් තුනේ. මොකද ආණ්ඩුව ගණන් ගත්තනේ කාලකන්නිම. ආණ්ඩුව කාලකන්නිම ගණන් ගත්තා. ප්‍රයිවට් සෙක්ටර් එක ගණන් ගන්නෑ. උපාධියක් නෙවෙයි උපාධි 50ක් දාන්නවත් ගණන් ගන්නෑ. ආණ්ඩුව කියන කාලකන්නිය ගණන් ගන්න පටන් ගත්තා. උපාධිධාරීන්. අන්න ආණ්ඩුව බම්පලොත් තුනේ. හොඳ වැඩ. කාලකන්නිය ගණන් ගත්තා. හරි. ඒකන්ද ඕන කෙනෙක්ට මේ ඩිග්‍රියක් ගන්න එන්න කියන්නේ මොකද ගත්ත පළියට ඔයාගේ වැලියු එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ එහෙනම්. No, you get the value not because you have a degree, but because you can develop software, you can manage information systems, you know how to do data mining, and that is where you have the value. That is where people are interested in getting you as a employee, giving you more and more responsibilities. Not because you have this degree or that degree or other degree. Who cares your degrees? Who cares? සත පහකට ගණන් ගන්න. වැඩකාරයෙක් නම් එතකොට ගණන් ගන්න. වැඩකාරයා ඩිග්‍රීකුත් තියෙනවා නම් තවත් හොඳ ගණන් ගන්න. වැඩ බැරි හාල් පාවරේට ඩිග්‍රියක් තියෙන කියලා කවුරුත් ගණන් ගන්න. අර ගණන් ගත්ත කාලකන්ණිය දැන් ඔන්න බංකොලොත් වෙලා ඉන්නේ. රස්සා දීලා. අයි උපාධාරීන්ට රස්සා දෙන්න ඕන කොහොමද දුන්නා? මොන බංකොලොත් වෙලා හිඟන්නේ කියලා ඉන්නවා. ගත්ත ණයත් ගෙවන්න නැතුව ඒ වඩා පොළු තියලා පේනවනේද? කාලකන්ණිය ගණන් ගන්න කියලා වෙච්ච වැඩේ. ප්‍රයිවට් සෙක්ටර් එකේ නෙවෙයි බංකොලොත් උනේ රජයේ බංකොලොත් උනේ. ප්‍රයිවට් සෙක්ටර් එක බංකොලොත් උනේ නෑ. මොකද මේ මිනිස්සුන්ට අමාරුවක් නෑනේ මේ. එහෙම ගණන් ගන්න. Right. So what is the definition of class? Class represents or models set of similar objects. Class represents or models set of similar objects or all those similar objects. If there are millions of similar objects, right, all those millions of objects are represented by that particular class. To represent all the account objects, you have account class. To represent all the payment objects, you have the payment class. To represent all the student objects, you have one student class. So then someone will ask, why do you want to model it? Because when you model it when you create using object-oriented programming language like Java, C#, Python, that language provides facility to create objects. So if you ask from a software developer, they will say, yes, when you have class, you can create objects. That is why we model the class. And that object has all these attributes and behaviors. And that object has all these attributes and behaviors. So that is what we need, right? Because your student object must have the student number, student name, contact number, attend behavior, right? And so on. If it is employee check-in behavior, check-out behavior, that object has those behaviors. That object has those attributes as long as you create the object from that particular class. If you create a account object, it has account attributes and behaviors. If you create a customer object, that object has customer attributes and behaviors. මේක ටික ටික මම කරන්නේ ඒකයි යා මේක හදිසියක් නෑ මට කරන්න. මොකද මේක උපාධිගත අයටත් සමහර ගොඩක් අයට තේරෙන්නේ නෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ රැකියා විරහිත උපාධිධාරී ඔයගොල්ලෝ හිතන IT ඩිග්‍රී ගන්න හැමෝම IT ෆීල්ඩ් එකේ ඉන්නවා කියලා. අපෝ නෑ. IT ඩිග්‍රී අය ගන්න එකකින් මම නම් හිතන්නේ 125කට වඩා IT ෆීල්ඩ් එකේ නෑ. 180ක් විතර IT ඩිග්‍රී අරගෙන වෙනවා කරලා මගුලක් කර කර ඉන්නවා. ඒකට කමන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ආසාවෙන් කරන දෙයක් නං. හරි. සමහරව ආසාවෙන් නෙමෙයි වෙන කරන්න මගුලක් නැති කමට ගිහින් වෙන මගුලක් කරනවා. IT ඩිග්‍රියෙන් කරගන්න තේරෙන්නේ මොකුත් බෑ යාට. මොකද හරියට ඉගෙන ගත්තේ නැහැ. එයා නිකන් උපාධියක් ගත්ත විතරයි. මං කියන්නේ බොරුද කියලා ඕන්න අපි සංගණනයක් කරලා බලමු. ඕගොල්ලෝ නෑයොන්ගේ එහෙම අහලා බලන්න IT ඩිග්‍රී තියෙන අයියලා මල්ලිලා කී දෙනෙක් IT ෆීල්ඩ් එකේ ඉන්නවද කියලා. එහෙම ඉන්න පුළුවන් ෆීල්ඩ් එකක් නෙමෙයි IT කියන්නේ. IT කියන්නේ ඔළුවෙන් වැඩක් කරන්න ඕන ෆීල්ඩ් එකක්. ටැබ් වගේ වාඩි කරලා තියන්න බෑ. තිබ්බ කියලා එලෝටත් නැහැ මෙලෝටත් නැහැ ආයතනයටත් වැඩක් නැහැ. Right. So class represents or model set of similar objects. And once you do that using object-oriented programming language, that language provides a facility to create objects out of that. So then that object has all those attributes and behaviors. So therefore we say that class can act as a blueprint of factory. Factorying එනවා වගේ නේද? ice cream factorying ice cream එනවා වගේ, car factorying car එනවා වගේ ඔන්නවට දැන් customer class එකෙන් එනවා customer objects, account class එකෙන් එනවා account objects, payment class එකෙන් එනවා payment objects. Right? But all these things happens in your computer memory. Okay. Right. So can someone tell me, at least guess, when does a particular software create objects? Just give me a practical scenario. පොඩ්ඩක් programming කරලා තියෙන කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවනේ කියන්න බෑ. මොන වෙලාවෙද let's assume we have banking application that manage customers, their accounts, their payments, money transfers, deposit, withdraw, and so on. Can someone tell me, of course, you do all those interactions using applications, right? Either your e-banking application, or you go to the ATM machine and do it, or you go inside the bank and do this using the counter. Even though you do it in the counter person is again using the software. කොතනින් ගියත් අන්නේ software එකෙන් ඔක් කරන්නේ. Whether you do it from home or go to the ATM machine or go inside the bank and do through the counter, ultimately your transaction is done by system. දෙකෙන් දැන් මේ දවස්වල ලොකු කතා බහක් ගියා මොකද්ද? ආණ්ඩුව සල්ලි අච්චු ගන්නවාද? නේද? එතකොට ඒකට කට්ටිය දුන්න උත්තරේ තමයි ආණ්ඩුව සල්ලි අච්චු ගහන්නේ නැහැ. නේද? අගමැති කියලා තුන එහෙම කොහෙද? එයාගේ අස්සනින් වාට කොලේ නැහැ. එතකොට සමහර විටන් කියන ආණ්ඩුව සල්ලි අච්චු ගහන්නේ නැහැ කියන්නේ නැහැ කියන්නේ හරි නේද? ඉතින් හත්තිලා ඔය ආණ්ඩුව සල්ලි අච්චු ගහනවා කියලා ඉස්සෙල්ලා සල්ලි අච්චු ගන්න. දැන් මිනිස්සු සල්ලි වලින් නෙමෙයි වැඩ කරන්නේ. හරි. දැන් මිනිස්සු වැඩ කරන්නේ ඉලෙක්ට්‍රොනික වලින්. ඉලෙක්ට්‍රොනික වලින්. සල්ලි අල්ලන්නේ නැහැ දැන් අපි. මගේ ඔක්කොම පේමන්ට් කරන්නේ ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ් එකෙන්. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ සල්ලි ඔයගොල්ලෝ සල්ලි අච්චු ගහපු සල්ලි ගිහිල්ලා දෙන්නේ සමසෙට් එකට. නෑ නේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ ට්‍රාන්ස්ෆර් කරන්නේ මනින්. අන්න ඒවා තමයි මේ හදන්නේ මේ දවස්වල. ඒවා හදනවා කියන්නේ වැඩේ හරි. හරි ඒවා හදනවා කියන්නේ වැඩේ හරි. අච්චු ගහලා දෙන්න ඕනේ නෑ දැන්. අච්චු ගහලා අර පාවිච්චි කරනවා. අහිංසක මිනිස්සෙක් ඈත ගමක ඉන්න නේද? අනිත් මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම තමන්ගේ දේවල් පෙට්‍රල් ගෙවුවත් ක්‍රෙඩිට් කාඩ් එකෙන් පේ කරන්නේ. කොටින් මිනිහා රට යනකොට ඒක සල්ලි ගෙවන්නේ කාඩ් එකෙන්. ඉතින් ඔකට සල්ලි දාන්න පුළුවන් දැන් ඉස්සර වගේ අච්චු ගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. චුනකහ දාන්න පුළුවන්. Right. So now tell me, when do we create customer object? Customer object එක කොහෙද create වෙන්නේ? ඔයා බැංකුවේ මොනවා කරද්දි මොන වෙලාවෙද object එක create වෙන්නේ server එකේ? That is my question. Just guess it. Is the bank name can be attribute of the account? No. Right? Bank name is attribute of the bank object or bank class. Bank name is not attribute of the account. Okay. Anyone? In the server of your banking system, say commercial bank, your account is in commercial bank. You go to the commercial bank ATM and withdraw money or deposit money, or with, let's say, withdraw money. Deposit කරාම නම් පොඩ්ඩක් කාලෙ ගිහිල්ලානේ deposit වෙන්නේ. නේද? ඔක physically අරගෙන තමයි deposit කරන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ පස්සේ. Withdraw automatically happens. So you do a money transfer. When does, say you have account, right? Your details are in the bank. එතන ඔයාගේ object එකක් හැදෙනවද? Custom object එකක් හැදෙනවද? කොයි වෙලාවෙද? නැත්නම් account object එකක් හැදෙන්නේ කොයි වෙලාවෙද? මේක තේරුම් ගන්න නැතුව මේක ඉස්සරහට යන්න බෑ. Not when you open a new account. That is wrong answer. Right? Of course, when you open a new account, also object is created, but that is not that is one place where object is created. But frequently objects are created at what time? For example, when you go to the ATM machine and insert your card, okay? You go to the ATM machine and insert your card and then enter the PIN number. Say PIN number is, even before entering the PIN number in the server, customer object is created. Okay. Still, it doesn't know the account, and actually it can create the account object also, because if your card is connected to the account, right? If your card is connected to the account, first account object is created, and when the account object is created, custom object is also created in the server, because object is something in the memory. Then you do the money, say money withdraw. So that means your account, the customer object called the withdraw behavior of the account object. Right? So then your account balance is up, reduce. Say you withdraw 10,000. Now in the server, withdraw method is called for your account object. Your account object. Not for someone else's account object. So ඔයාගේ account object එක මේ අමුත්තක් එක ඇතුළේ නැහැ. ඒක හැදෙන්නේ memory එකේ. හරි. That is on the fly that object is created and memory is allocated. How do you know that it is your account object? Account number is your account number. That's it. ඔච්චරයි. Account number එක දින ආගේ account number එක. That is why we say it's your account object. And then the withdraw method is called. So therefore your balance is reduced, say by 10,000, and that value is written to the database. So therefore now your database, your account record in the account table has 10,000 less value. Earlier maybe 1 lakh, now 90,000. So then it will ask, do you want to do any other transaction? You say no. And when the credit card, your card is ejected from the ATM, that account object is garbage collected, because you don't need that account object anymore. On account object එක හැදුනා, server එකේ තියුණා, account object එක destroy වුණා. ඒ අතරතුර account object එක එක වැඩ ටිකක් කරා, ඒවා වුණා database එක update කරා. දැන් ආයෙ account object එක හැදෙන්නේ කවදාද? ආයෙ එක්ක බැංකුවට ගිහලා සල්ලි withdraw කරන්න ඕන, නැත්නම් ගෙදර ඇවිල්ලා ATM from your e-banking app, you want to do a money transfer or whatever. Now again you log into the you come home and you now remember, I need to pay my electricity bill. Right? So now you log in using your maybe from the bank's website, right? Or from the bank's app you have in your phone. The moment you log in, Again, custom object is created because it want to authenticate your username, password, and so on again. And again, if you do a money transfer, again your account object is created and relevant things are done. And again, maybe your balance is reduced because you do a money transfer to the CEB. And again, it is persisted in the table. And again, when you log off, that object is deleted. ඔය වගේ මේ වෙලාවේ ලක්ෂයක් කමර්ෂල් බැංක් එකේ ඇප් එකත් එක්ක වැඩ කරනවා නම් සර්වර් එකේ ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් ලක්ෂයක් තියෙනවා. ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් ලක්ෂයක් කියන්නේ මහා ලොකු දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. Okay? Because we have gigabytes of memory. ඔය ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් එකකට යන්නේ බොහොම පොඩි bytes ප්‍රමාණයක්. Just it need to keep your account number, balance and few more things. එතකොට එක ඔබ්ජෙක්ට් එකකට යන්නේ bytes ප්‍රමාණය. පොඩි kilobytes ප්‍රමාණය. ලක්ෂයක් එක වෙලාවෙ මේ වෙලාවේ මම හිතන්නේ බැංකුවේ සිස්ටම් එකත් එක්ක වැඩ කරන ඇති නේද? ඔක්කොම ATM machine ගත්තා ලක්ෂයක් නෑ නෝ. ATM machine නැති ඕනනම් 300ක් මේ වෙලාවේ log වෙලා transaction කරන්න තව 300,000. Okay. Just think about it. මේක හිතන්න නැතුව වෙන බහූත කොනවා හිතුවද දරන්නේ නැහැ. What software develop කරන්න බෑ. Right. Any questions? Okay. Yes, whenever there's a transaction, these objects are created. At the end of the transaction, no, when you log off, those objects are destructed. So therefore, don't think that your objects are there in the memory forever. No. So therefore, that memory goes up and down. Just like we start a program and close the program. Okay. Right. So therefore, your class can create objects. Therefore, it's acting like a factory, but those are temporary objects. It's created in the memory and again destroy or garbage collector. And again, object is created maybe for a different customer, different object. Or if the same customer, same object, or same object means just the attribute has the same value. Okay. For 100 customers, there can be 100 customer objects, 100 accounts. If 100 people are doing transactions related to 100 accounts, then 100 objects are the account objects are in the memory of that server, maybe the web server. Okay. Right. So this is how you do it. First you create a class and this is how you create object. Then මේක තාම ATM machine එකක්වත් web app එකක්වත් නෙමෙයි. තාම අහිංසක විදිහට කරන්නේ ආ. To represent all the objects of a particular type, you create a class. Then your application can create object like this. In Java, this is how you create object. If you have account class, account, give it a name like variable name like XYZ, new account, start bracket, end bracket. So this is how you create object. If you want to create another account object, again, account maybe A2 equal new account. So you must know exactly what is happening when you write this kind of a line and execute. Okay. So this is a 3-step process. Right. So this is called reference variable of account type. Account is a class, just like you can have int variables, byte variables, string variables, Boolean variables. Now you can have account variables. If you have account class, if you have payment class, you can have payment variables. And this is a variable of account type. You can give any name. This is how you create object of account class. Okay. This is where memory is allocated for account class, account object. Memory allocated means if you have any attributes here, those to assign values to those attributes or instance variables, memory is allocated. Set of memory addresses are allocated. When someone creates another account object, different set of memory locations are allocated for that account number, balance, and so on. මේක හරියට visualize කරනොත් තේරෙන්නේ නැත අහන්න. තේරෙන්නේ නැත අහන්න. ඉතින් මේක වෙන අතරතුර database එකත් එක්ක වැඩ කළා තමයි value gain හැබැයි යා. ඒකත් දැන් තාම කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. So that because we have not discussed the database connectivity. ඔය object එක හැදෙනකොටම database එකත් එක්ක connect වෙලා තමයි attributes ටික අරන් එන්නේ. හරි attributes ටික අරන්. කොහොමද දැන් මොන attributes ටික අරන් එන්නේ? ඒක තමයි ඔයාගේ account ඔයා දාන card එකේ තියෙන card number එක. ඒ card number එකට අනුව account number එක තියෙනවා. ඔය card එකේ account number එක තියෙනවා type කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. එකහඳ database එකේ account number එකට අදාළ record එක තමයි ඇවිල්ලා ඒ data ටික තමයි memory එකට දාන්නේ. Okay. So I am not at all hurry. මම කිසිම හදිසියක් නැහැ මට මේක explain කරන්න. ඔයාලට හදිසුණු මේක කරගන්නත් බෑ. Okay. So this is just reference variable is created. Your reference variable is something like a remote control. Remote control, where you can access the memory locations, memory addresses, and change your instance variables or attributes. This is where you create the object. Memory is allocated for different instance variables. Okay. And what is mean by equal? Equal means now your reference variable A1 is referring to this particular object. This particular object. Okay. So it's a three-step process. Reference variable is created, object is created, and of course it is initialized. And now this equal mark says this reference variable refer to this object. And if you have another object, account A2 equal new account, another reference variable referring to different object or different memory locations. Okay. Different memory locations. Right. So we'll take a small break. After the break, we'll continue with messaging. Okay. Right. So now it's 2:52. Let's say 2:55. We'll start at 3:10. And we'll do some practical coding also. Okay. Some coding පටන් ගත්තේ නැහැ. දැන් coding පටන් ගන්න. We'll start at 3:10. Right. So I will create a class. SRC. I will say new class. Okay. So let's call this account. Just give it any name. Okay. Account. So it says public class account. Right. So now you can have your attributes and behaviors. Okay. Attributes, behaviors. So for the time being, let's not have any attributes and behaviors. Now I want to create a test. Of course, testing. Usually, of course, these objects are created when someone log into the system or you insert your ATM card and so on, right? But I don't have ATM machine or any application, so therefore I just create a test class. I will call it account test. This is just to explain what is object, what is a class, and so on. Okay. Right. And also we need to run the program. So usually for Java, starting point of a program is main method. So therefore here I will write the main method. Right. So now how do you create an object of account class? So every programming language, if it support object orientation, it provide a way to create object. In Java, you need to give the class name, give it a variable name like A1 or something, and say new. It's another keyword in Java, and say account, because I want to create account object. And this is how you create account object. Okay. And if you want to create another account object, of course, as I told you, we don't just create account objects like this, right? For example, when someone log into the system, one account object. So from the other ATM machine, another guy log in, so that another account object. That is how it happens with practice. But I don't have application to demonstrate that. Okay. But make sure you give it a different name. Of course, now when I run it, nothing will happen. Just account object is created. Here, two objects are destroyed. Memory is deallocated. Okay, deallocated. So nothing is happening. Okay. Right. So then your class can have attributes and behaviors. Right. For example, if you have account number, maybe string, say ACCT num, just give a brief name. Maybe balance, double. Okay. And so on. So then the behaviors like deposit, withdraw, say void, deposit. These are just methods. Okay. right? So remember your behaviors have access to the variables, instance variables. So here, say when you deposit, you must say how much you deposit. Okay, so let's have parameter. Say double amount. So here you can say balance must be incremented by this amount. Balance equal balance plus amount. Or you can say, if you want to write it short, you can say balance plus C equal amount. That is another way of writing the same thing. So then what about the withdraw? Of course, now I am not referring to the databases and so on, right? So that you can do it later. I'm just modeling the class, say withdraw. So then balance equal balance minus amount. Okay. So now, if you want in your test class, you can set the account number, the A1 dot, you use the dot notation. The ACC num, let's say 001. Okay. So account one want to do a withdraw, say deposit behavior, A1 dot. This is called messaging, creating object and calling the behavior. This is not messaging. This is referring to the attributes. This is messaging. Okay. Uh, say deposit. How much? Say 1,000, 10,000. Okay. Maybe you can, of course, usually someone will not do both deposit and withdraw at the same time, right? But this is just to simulate. Okay. Say A1 dot withdraw. Say 2,000. So similarly, let's say this guy also has an account number. Of course, you don't set like this. Usually, your card number has your credit. When you insert your card, the machine will read the account number from your card. Okay, that is why we say those are smart cards. A2 dot, say, account number. Let's say it is 0006, and let's say we do say, let's assume it's only doing a deposit of 5,000. Now say I want to print. Now, I am not doing this as a practical in the sense this is not how it is practically done. Okay, just to demonstrate that what you can do with the objects. Okay, so let's say A2 deposit, and let's say we want to show the account number and uh, balance of each and every account number. Say A1 dot account number, maybe something like that. Uh, Concatenation, and A1 dot balance. So I want to print the second account details as well. Assume A2 dot account number, A2 dot balance. Now A1's account number is 001, its balance must be 8,000. A2's account number is 006, its balance must be 5,000. Okay. So different objects, they keep track of it their own values because we deposit 10,000 and withdraw 2,000. So therefore balance is 8,000. Here we just deposit 5,000, therefore balance is 5,000. So this is how you create objects from the class. This is how you refer to the instance variables. This is how you call behavior. So we call it messaging. This is message in the A1 object. We call deposit behavior, withdraw behavior. This is your message in the A2 objects to call the deposit behavior. And this is we are referring to the variables or the attributes. Okay. Right. So that is just to give you a feeling of how object-oriented programs create objects, call behaviors, and so on. Okay. So, but this is not the end of the story. This is just the start of the story. Okay. How to create an object. So usually these things happens in the server when users initiate certain things. Right. So now let's move on to our discussion again. Right. So now you must have better understanding about this. You can see from car class we can create car objects. So similarly, from account class we can create account objects using the new keyword. Okay. And this is how you create an object. You can create a number of objects. Okay. So when you refer to A1, you are referring to the A1 related memory locations. When you say A2, different account object, you are referring to a different account object. Okay. Right. So then messaging means one object calling behaviors of another object, or your main method calling behaviors of another object, because main method you don't need, it's not object. Okay. And maybe that object can call a behavior of another object and so on. So that is how object-oriented system work. I told you that at the beginning, when you develop software using object-oriented manner, you think of your system as set of objects communicating and collaborating with other objects. Maybe that object communicating with this object. And also it is communicating with maybe this object. Maybe this object communicating with another object. And ultimately, due to their collaboration, a particular transaction is done. Okay. So how these objects are created? Like account A equal new account. Maybe this is payment. Payment P equal new payment. But this object is created by this object. And these two objects are created by this object. That is how in reality it happens. Still, we have not get into that kind of detail level. But at the end, you need to understand this. මේක තේරුම් ගත්ත කියන්නේ object oriented විදිහට software develop කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේක තේරුම් ගත්තේ නැහැ කියන්නේ කරන්න බෑ. එච්චරයි. කරන්න පුළුවන් කරන්න බෑ. ඔය දෙක එකක් තමයි තියෙන්නේ අන්තිමට. එක්ක කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි, එක්ක කරන්න බැරි වෙයි. ඒක වාගේ effort එක, talent එක, attitude එක අනුව decide වෙයි. So there are plenty of final year students. So they got into the final year and then they start learning these things. While loop එක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද, object එක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද කියලා final year ගිහිල්ලා පටන් ගන්න. ඇයි ඒ? project එක කරගන්න බෑ. මම හිතන්නේ final year ගිහිල්ලා කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා project එක. final year එක කරන්න ඕන. final year එකේ වැඩ මිසක් semester 1 එකේ වැඩ නෙමෙයි. ඔය ටික එකට එකතු කරලා හිතන්න බෑ තාම. ඒ කියන්නේ capacity එක මදි. So this is the time to think about those things. Start developing some programs. Okay. So what happens in object-oriented system is, as I told you in the very first slide, we look at the system as set of objects communicating and collaborating with other objects. Okay. And these can be different objects. Maybe this is a customer object. Maybe this is account object. Maybe this is another payment object. Maybe this is an email object. And these things communicate and collaborate. The end result is a particular transaction is done. Okay. Particular transaction is done. But these object creation, calling behaviors are happening in the server, machine, computer. These things are initiated maybe by your UI, ATM machine, your banking app, and so on. I'm just taking banking app as example, or maybe supermarket. These things are happening in the supermarket server, point of sale server, or in that machine itself. if it is standalone application. So this is another example to explain something like that. I think someone is keep drawing in the screen, right? Don't draw anything in the screen because you are drawing it in the shared screen. Okay, don't draw. Okay, in the screen because I need to then keep erasing what you are drawing. Right. So let's assume we have a particular customer is doing a using credit card. So that customer, credit card or debit card, doing a payment, say online payment in a e-commerce site or something. So customer object is activated when the customer login, say to the banking app, banking site. Then the payment object is created. Then there are two account objects. One account object is for the customer. From that account, money must be reduced. Remember when the customer doing a payment to a vendor, right? So just assume this is a money transfer. Say you are doing money transfer to Somerset campus. So then from your account, say 8,000 must be reduced, right? So your payment object send a message to, actually there are two account objects are created. One account object for you, other account object for Somerset account. Then there's a message passing from here to your account object saying, calling the debit method. Debit means reduce the balance. Then say Somerset account object, this happens in the server, it calls the credit method. And of course, there will be a notify method call on an email utility or the SMS utility class to send the SMS that is handled separately. And then there's a message calling the Somerset account object to credit because money is added to that. Money is removed, reduced from your account, added to the vendor's account. Maybe there's another email utility. This account called the email utility class again, same class, maybe different object. And it will be received by the receiver. So this SMS is for you, this SMS is maybe for the vendor, saying that money is credited. You can see set of objects, customer object, payment object, two account objects, same class, two different objects. This is for your account, this is for the receiver's account. Assume it's the same bank. Of course, if it is two banks, there is a web service calls and other things also. So this is a very simplified way of showing how a particular transaction is done. And this involves customer class, payment class, account class, two objects of the account class, two objects of the notification class, and so on. You will not be able to understand it in one day, but gradually, day by day, by doing more and more exercises, you need to understand this. Only way to understand this is doing exercises. So you must do exercises right now, not when you are in semester 3. හරි ඒ කියන්නේ ඔය බේල් 10ක් නොකා ඉඳලා මාසේ අන්තිම දවසේ දවස් 30ටම කන්න බෑනේ නේද? ඒක වෙන්නේ නැහැ නේද? දැන් සමහරව හිතන් ඉන්නවා මේ නොකා ඉඳලා 30 වෙනිදාට මම මාසෙටම කනවා කියලා. එහෙම කන්න බෑ. කන්න බෑ නෙමෙයි එතකොට මැරිලා. මලමිනියක් ඊට පස්සේ ඉන්නේ. කියන්නේ ඔයා 3rd year එකට ගිහිල්ලා ෆිසිකලි හැබැයි ඔයාගේ අර අධ්‍යාපනයේ පැත්තෙන් ආව මලගිය පරාණයක් ඉන්නේ තුන්වෙනි අවුරුද්දේ. මොකද මේ දවස්වල මෙලෝ මගුලක් කරලා නැහැ. එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙම කරන්න බෑ වැඩක්. නේද? ධන ගන්න ඕන කාලේ ධන ගන්න ඕන. බඩ ගන්න ඕන කාලේ බඩ ගන්න ඕන. එකපාරට අවුරුදු 5කට ගිහිල්ලා දඩ ගාලා බඩ ගාලා දඩ බඩ ගාලා දුවන්න බෑ. එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. ධන ගන්න ඕන කාලේ ධන ගෑවේ නැත්නම් බඩ ගන්න ඕන කාලේ බඩ ගෑවේ නැත්නම් ඉතින් වැඩේ ඉවරයි. මලමිනියක් ඉතුරු වෙන්නේ. විභාගවලදී මොනාරි බොරුවක් කියලා කටපාඩම් කරලා ඒක වමාරලා අයනවා එච්චරයි. කම්පිටන්සි බිල්ඩ් කරනවා කියන්නේ ඒක නෙමෙයි. ඒක තේරුම් ගන්න නැහැ ගොඩක් අය. කොච්චර කිව්වත්. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ දකින්නේම බොරුවෙන් ජීවත් වෙන මිනිස්සුනේ. සමහර අම්මා තාත්තත් බොරුවෙන් ජීවත් වෙනවා ඇති. අහල පහල මිනිස්සුත් බොරුවෙන් ජීවත් වෙනවා ඇති. කියලා. එහෙමයි තමයි ගොඩක් අය එහෙම කරන්නේ හැබැයි. Right. So now let's dig in a little bit more because now you must have a little bit more understanding about what is happening, at least what is object creation, what is method call, how to access attributes and so on. Okay. Now remember class have two things, attributes and behaviors. If it is a student, student name, student ID, date of birth, attributes. Behaviors, attend exam. Okay, so that kind of things. Behaviors. If it is account number, balance, account type, interest rate, attributes. Behaviors, deposit, withdraw, add interest. Okay. Now these attributes can be, when it comes to coding, mapping to either instance variables or class, or sometimes we call it static variables. All your attributes will end up as either instance variables or class variables. All your behaviors will end up as either instance methods or class methods. There's nothing else. Every behavior must be either instance method or class method. Every attribute will end up as either instance variable or class variable. Okay. So then you must know what is the difference between instance variable and class variable. Instance method and class method. What kind of attributes you want to make it instance variables? What kind of attributes will end up as class variable? What kind of behaviors you want to model and implement as instance methods? Which type of behaviors you want to model as static or class methods? Okay. Right. Instance variable means if you have a variable in your class without static keyword, those are instance variables. String, account number, int, balance. So those are all not inside methods, just inside the class without static keyword. If you have variables, those are instance variables. Both of these are instance variables. And if you have variables inside your class with static keyword, like this, that is a class variable or static variable. So there is a difference between instance variable and class or static variable. Okay, so how do you decide whether your attribute you want to make it instance variable or class variable? Then මේ decisions වලට ගන්න වෙනවා. මේ decisions ගන්න බැරි කෙනාට software develop කරන්න බෑ. එතනින් එහාට වැඩි ඉස්සරහට යන්නේ නැහැ. So how do you decide whether it's an instance variable or class variable? Instance variable means every instance. Instance is another name for object because from class you can create objects. Okay. So if every object, so every instance get its own value, then it's an instance variable. So you create a one account object, another account object, another account object, and every account object has its own value. It's not shared. So then you make it as instance variable. For example, account number. Your account number is not my account number. So it must be instance variable. When you log in, your object must have your account number. When I log in the ATM machine, object is created. That object must have my account number. Read from my card. Then, if that is the case, make sure you model when you code, make sure you code it as an instance variable. And obviously, your balance is not my balance. When I do withdraw, my balance will be reduced. When you do withdraw, your balance must be reduced. When you deposit, your balance must be increased. When I deposit, my balance must be increased. So those are candidate for what? Instance variables. Every object of that, those instance variables will get their own values. And memory will be separately allocated. Okay. Any questions? So then you have class variables. So class variable means that value is shared by all the objects of that type. All the objects of that type. It is not every object get its own value. No, every object is looking at the shared value. Shared value. And if one object change it, others also can change it. Others also can see the value, new value. They also access the new value. So then that kind of a variable is called static variable or class variable. So only thing is now you use the static keyword before the variable. Earlier just a string account number, float or double balance. But now static float interest rate. So that means interest rate is a static variable. Why? Because there's nothing called your interest rate, my interest rate, and other interest rate. If you have particular savings account and I have the same savings account and Nimal has a same savings account, we all have the same interest rate. We all have the same interest rate. So therefore, interest rate is not something every object get different. All the object of that particular account class, say savings account, say Vanita Vasana or Vanit whatever, right? Tikiri savings account. So all the Tikiri savings account will have the same account, same interest rate. So then it's a candidate for static variable or class variable. Class variable. When interest rate is modified or changed for a particular account type, all the account will get that new value because it is not only for you. All the account for the next month, new interest rate is used. Okay, right. So therefore, that kind of variables we mark it as static, common. Okay, not specific to each and every instance. So that you can use your common sense and decide should it be an instance variable or class variable. For that, you must be able to take that decision. If you can't take that decisions, you must develop that skill. Okay. Right. So instance variables, every object. So you can see this object has its own values or memory allocated. A1 object, A2 object has its own value. Let's assume these are the memory locations. Okay. So when you A1 refer to something, that is A1's values. A2 refer to A2's values. Then those can be different. Okay. Actually, this account number must be something else. Otherwise, you will get confused, right? Okay, let's say this is a 001. Okay. So this one is referring to 001 account. Other one is referring to 002 account. And those are having different balance because those are instance variables. Instance variables. Right? A1 balance. Similarly, you can say A2 balance. When you do deposit for A1, A1's balance is affected. When you do deposit for A2, A2's balance is affected. Okay. But class variables, you can see interest rate is not here. Not every object get interest rate. Every object gets is of one account number and balance. Account number and balance. Okay. Again, let's call it 001. But interest rate is not kept in that object because interest rate is a static variable. It is common. Your A1, A2, everyone is looking at the same interest rate. It is not that A1 has its own interest rate, A2 has its own. Of course, A1 has its own balance. A2 has its own balance, but A1 and A2 both referring to the same interest rate. That is common to all the objects of the same class. Right? Okay. So therefore, when you refer to the class variables, now let's model it. So now we gradually model the scenario. Now, earlier I just call it attribute, but now I call this instance variables. And these are instance variables. Why? Because I have not added any static keyword. But if I take interest rate, I don't want to make it instance variable. I will make it static. Say double interest rate. Maybe I can initialize that also. Say 0.05%. Okay, 5% interest. And that is a class variable or static variable. Okay, so that is a class variable. Now you must understand the difference between instance variable and class variable. Okay, so this is a shared variable for all the object of account of all the account objects. But every object will get its own account number and balance. Now, how do you access this? So the standard way of accessing is don't use the objects references. You don't need because it's not related to instance. It's related to the class. So you can just use the class name account dot. You can refer to the class variable. If you just want to change it to something. So let's change it to 0.03. Say we reduce the interest rate. Okay. Okay, let's have the interest rate also print here. If you want, you can refer to the interest rate using A1 and A2, but that is not the preferred way. You can just, or if you want, you can do it. Say A1 dot interest rate. That you can see it is not giving me the suggestion also because that is a bad practice. Anyway, I can do it. Interest rate. That this is a warning, not error. Okay, warning saying that this is bad practice. But anyway, I'll do it, though it's a bad practice. So this is the interest rate. Actually, whether I refer to it as A1 or A2, I will be getting the same interest rate because it's a class variable. Though I say A2 interest rate, A1 interest rate, it's not going to be two different values, okay? Because it's a class variable. You can see for 0.05. Now, if I change it, both A1 and A2 will see the same effect. Okay? Both A1 and A2 will see the same effect. So again, print it. After changing the interest rate, of course, the balance are not going to affect, but the interest rate will be different for both the account now. Because change is for class level. Interest rate is a class variable. So every object can see the same effect now. Okay. Or you can just refer to it as class name dot this rather than the references. Okay. So that is the difference between instance variable and class variable. For class variables, memory is allocated only once, but instance variables, every object will get its own memory and own value. Right. Any questions? So you must know what is the instance variable, what is a class variable, what kind of things are candidate for instance variables, what kind of attributes are candidate for class variables. If it is common for all objects, make it class If it is every object must have its own value, make it instance variable. Okay. Because when you refer to a class variable, basically you are referring to the same value, whether that object or other object, or you can just use the class name. Right. So each instance get its own value, memory location for instance variable, common variable for class or all the objects of that class. No special keyword required, use static keyword. So must access using object reference. Class variables can be accessed using class name, that is the preferred way, or using the object reference, though it is not the preferred way. So these are some examples. Account number, balance, possibly instance variables, interest rate, transaction fee, because assume that every transaction has the same fee, class variable. Okay. All right. So next thing is the behaviors. So behaviors can be ended up as either instance methods or class methods. Instance method or class method. So then what is the difference between instance method and class method? So if you don't have the static keyword in your method, that is the instance method. If you have the static keyword, that is a class method. For example, we already have instance method, two instance methods. What are those two instance methods? Deposit and withdraw. You can see no static keyword. Actually, those are instance methods. Instance methods. Both are instance methods. How do you decide whether it's an instance method or class method? This is the rule. Very simple rule. If your method refer to, that is either read or change any of the instance variable, that must be an instance method. For example, deposit method change the balance. Balance is an instance variable. So therefore, you can't mark this as class variable. It must be an instance method. Sorry, you can't mark it as a class method. You must make it keep it as an instance method because you are referring to the one of the instance variable. If you refer to at least one instance variable, your method, you must mark it as instance method. That means don't use static keyword. So same for the deposit, withdraw. But if your method does not refer to any of the instance variable, then you can mark it as a class or static method. Now this one also I can't make it as static. Static, right? I will get error. You can see red. It says non-static field balance cannot be referenced from static context. So it says you are referring to a non-static variable from your static method. So therefore, this is not allowed. This is red. So therefore, let's make it instance method. Okay. So if you want to have class method or static method, of course you can have, but make sure you don't refer to any of the instance variables. If you want, you can refer to any class variables optionally. Say we just want to, of course, for this class, practically we don't need any static method, but just to demonstrate, I will say void, say greet, just to demonstrate. Of course, this is not referring to any of the instance variables. Just S out, say by. Now this method does not refer to any of the instance variable, account number, balance. So therefore, I can mark it as static. Static. It's a class method. Now read method is a static method, but I can't make my withdraw deposit as static methods. I can make it static. Okay. And even I can call it also from either you can call it using class name account dot greet, that is the preferred way, or you can just call using any of the reference variables, but that is not the preferred way. That is bad practice, but possible. you can see that it is giving me a warning saying that is a bad thing, right? Static member account with associated via instance reference. So it says you are doing a bad thing, but this is not error. It's a warning. By the way, the output is going to be the same. So this is I call static method from using the class name, static method from the two instance references. This is not the preferred thing. This is actually not the bad practice or not preferred way. This is the preferred way, okay? If you want to call static methods or class methods, okay? Right, so now you must know what is instance method, what is a class method, what is the instance variable, what is a class variable, okay? So this is another example of class method. You can see this method does not refer to any of the instance variables. Of course, there are no instance variables also. It's just return the add the two parameters and return. So that is candidate for class method. Class method. So this is a comparison between instance method and class method. Method that access the instance variable, that means read or write, instance method. Method that does not access instance variable, class method. Don't use any special keyword, use static keyword. Must be accessed using object reference, can be accessed using class name, that is a preferred way, or object reference, though it is a bad practice. So these are some candidate: deposit, withdraw, add interest, because you are referring to the interest. Maybe set interest rate, because remember static method can refer to static variables or just greeting or something. Let's add greeting also to here. So those are candidate for static method. So static method can access static variables. That is fine, but you can't access instance variable. Okay? But instance method, why do you make it instance method? Because they access instance variable. Right. Any question? Any questions up to this point? Anything? Anything you have doubts? Anything that you need more clarification? Or anything you have conflicting view with your past knowledge about programming? Or maybe you have done some self studies about object oriented programming and now you feel like there's a conflicting thing. Now, even when you create a user interface, you will be creating a button object, frame object, event objects. So everything will be object oriented, right? After few weeks. Database connection is connection object. ඒව කරගන්න බැරි වෙනවා. හොඳට මතක තියාගන්න. BIT final year එකේ ඉන්නේ බොහොම පොඩි පිරිසක්. ඩිග්‍රිය ගන්නේ 300ක් විතර. 300 විතර තමයි ගන්න. ඔයාලට ගිහලා බලන්න පුළුවන් මම මේ කියන්නේ බොරුද කියලා. ඇයි ඒ? ඒගොල්ලෝ මේ ආසාවට BIT කරලාද? නෑ. බොරු කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා මගදී එතනින් එහාට යන්න බැරි වෙනවා. I think that is in your handbook. බලන්න handbook එකේ ඇති. ඒ අවුරුද්ද කී දෙනෙක්ද අරන් තියෙන්නේ කියලා. Okay. degree එක. කී දෙනෙක් finally ඉන්නවද කියලා. Right. So any question? The question තියෙනකොට question උත් නැහැ. හැබැයි ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ ඇත්තෙත් නැහැ සමහරව. එහෙම වෙන්නත් එපා ඉතින් නේ. දැන් තියෙනවා ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා විශ්ේ ගන්නටක් ගන්න. Can instance variable change static variable? There's nothing called instance variable change static variable. How can instance variable change static variable? Can you write a small code and explain what you mean? මොකක් වගේ දෙයක්ද ඔය කරන්න හදන්නේ? Maybe you can write a small code and say, can I do this? So then I can explain. Okay, because what if, does it mean that you want to assign, say, to an instance variable like x, you want to assign the static variable like s? Say, assume s is a static variable, x is a simple x is an instance variable. Maybe are you asking something like that? If you're asking something like that, answer is yes. You can assign the value, that is assigning the value of a static variable to an instance variable. That is fine. And other thing is, maybe your other question is, can you assign value of instance variable to a value of static variable? That is also possible. That is also possible. But you must do this in an instance method. You can't do any of these in a static method. Why? Now you know the reason. Why you can't do this kind of thing in a static method? Because static method cannot refer to instance variables. But instance variable can refer to static variable. So therefore, this kind of assignments are valid in a instance method. But this kind of assignments cannot be done in a instance class method or static method because static method cannot refer to instance variable. Okay. Right. දැන් තවත් මේවා ගැන සැක තියෙනවනම් හොඳම වැඩේ මොකද්ද? දැන් ඔයාලට තව යාළුවෙක් ඉන්නවා නේද? Ask ChatGPT. Can you explain with an example? එහෙම අහන්න ඕන හරිද? පොර පොඩ්ඩක්. හරි. Can you explain the difference between instance variable versus and class variable? ඊට පස්සේ කියන්න බලන්න පොඩි කෝඩ් එකක් අරන් මට එක්ස්ප්ලেইন කරන්න. අනේ සරලව එක්ස්ප්ලেইන් කරන්න. එහෙම අහන්න ඕන හරි. පිස්සු නම් ගෙලින්න බා ලොකු බර වචන දාලා. Say certainly. ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම. In object oriented programming, instance variable and class variable serves different purposes and have distinct characteristics. එයා කියනවා ඔව් ඔය දෙකක්. Instance variable. An instance variable is a variable that is defined within a class, but it is unique to each instance. මේක එක එක instance එකට වෙන වෙනම value තියෙනවා. Scope. Each object of the class get its own copy of the instance variable. I told you that memory is allocated. Changes made to the instance variable of one object do not affect the instance variable of another object. හරිනේ. ඔයාගේ ඊළඟ සල්ලි withdraw කරා කියලා මගේ balance එක වෙනස් වෙන්න බෑ. Usage. They are typically used to store data unique to each instance. ඒ instance එකට වෙන වෙනම තියෙන ඒවාට තමයි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. මෙයා explain කරලා තියෙන Python වලින් හැබැයි හරි. Class variable. Class variable is a variable that is defined directly within a class and is shared among all instances of the class. ඒක හැම instance එකටම පොදුයි. There is only one copy of the class variable and is shared by all instances. Modifying a class variable affects it across all the instances of the class. එක්කෙනෙක් වෙනස් කරොත් අනිත් එයාටත් ඒක පේනවා. Useful properties of attribute that should be the same for every instance of the class. හරි නේද? ඔය පාවිච්චි කරේ interest rate එකට. හැම ඒ account එකේ හැම instance එකටම එකම interest rate එක පේනවා. Okay. හරි මේ ඇවිල්ලා Python වලින් කියලා දෙයි. එයාට කියනවා Python මම දන්නේ නැහැ. Java වලින් මේක explain කරන්න කියලා. Difference කළා අපි ස්පෙලිං මිස්ටේක් එක හදා ගන්නවා. හරි. Using Java example. මොකද එයා අරන් තියෙන්නේ Python. දැන් මම මේක කළා පෙන්නන්නේ ඕගොල්ලෝ පුරුදු වෙන්න ඕනේ. එන්න මේ අනාගතයේ තියෙන ටූල් එක ජීවත් වෙන්න. හැමදාම ගුරුතුමාට වැඳගෙන ඉන්න බෑ. හරි. You can see car color because every object can have different colors. Right? Number of cars. ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ car pool එකේ කීයක් ඉන්නවද කියන එක. ඒක that is not something for the car, right? Every instance is not going to have a number of cars. It's a common thing. Common thing. So that they have make it as static. Okay. So now they have created some objects. For each object මේ construct එකේදී මේ variable එක වෙනස් set කරලා තියෙනවා. Now different cars have different colors, red, blue, green, but number of cars you can just refer to the class name and get number of cars because that is common. Okay, that is common. In instance variable, can we assign same variable in different objects with different values? In instance variables, can we assign same variable in different objects with different values? So the answer is this is not possible because can we assign same variable in different objects with different values? Again, the question is not clear. Can we assign same variable in different objects? How can different objects have the same variable? Maybe account 1 balance and account 2 balance. Okay. Again, the question is not clear. In instance variable, can we assign same variable in different objects? Maybe account 1 of balance and account 2 of balance. Still the question is not clear. මොකක්ද දැන් කරන්න හදනවා A1 ගේ balance එකටයි A2 ගේ balance එකටයි මොකද කරන්න හදන්නේ කියලා මට තාම තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. හරි. Still I can't understand your question, okay? I can understand part of the question but the other part is not clear. Okay? Right. Right. So now you know what is the instance variable, class variable, instance method, class method. Okay. So the next concept is constructor. Right? Constructor. That's it. Constructor gram you're right. So constructor is when you create an object like say this is I'm creating object. If you want to call a particular port at the object creation time and nothing afterwards, only at the object creation time only that code must be executed and not afterwards. So then you can create a constructor in your class. You can create a constructor in your class. So that will be automatically called every time object is created and subsequently you can't call it. Methods you can call at any time. Methods you can call at any time. But constructor is like a method, but it is called at the object creation time and no other time. So therefore, if you want to do some initialization or something at the object creation of time, this is the best place to write that code. So how do you write a constructor in Java? So you create something like a method with same name as your case sensitive class name. So then it is considered as the constructor. And make sure you don't return anything from your method constructor, not even void. Void cannot return කරන්න බෑ. Right, so let's create a constructor for account class. Constructor. So it's like a method, but don't return anything, not even void. If you want, you can have parameters. So this is a constructor. So here I'll just have a out just to see whether constructor is getting called. Say account object is created. Of course, if you want to get a database connections and blah, blah, blah for that particular object, you can do it here. Okay, you can do it here because every time you create object, this is getting called now. Okay, now here we create a count object. Now two times my constructor must be called at the end of execution. Okay, let's run and see. You can see account object is created. Account object is created. Why? Because your constructor has been called. Okay, so that is why that is your first line because at this point the constructor has been called. For the second object, again constructor is called. Okay, but you can't call that constructor for that object anymore. That is automatically called at this line, and that's all. That's all. ඒක හරියට ඉපදිච්ච ගමන් නෑ ඔයා ඉපදිච්ච ගමන් හොස්පිටල් එකේ ලේබර් රූම් එකේදී මොනවා හරි කරනවා නම් අන්න ඒක කරන්න ඕන වැඩේ ලියන්න ඕන කන්ස්ට්‍රක්ට් එක ඇතුලේ. ඔයා මිනිස්සෙක්ට කන්ස්ට්‍රක්ට් එක ලියුවා. හැබැයි ඒක ආයි කරන්න බෑ. දැන් ඔයා ආයි ලේබර් රූම් එකට එක්කන් ගිහලා එහෙම කරන්න බෑනේ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්න පොඩි ළමයෙක් ඉපදිච්ච ගමන් සාමාන්‍ය කරන වැඩක් තියෙනවා. මොකද්ද? anyone? ડોක්ටර්ස්ලා කරන වැඩක් තියෙනවා. Can you please send the codes to our... Yes, at the end of the session, I will send it, okay? At the end of the session, I will send code. Right? So if you want to do something at the object creation time and not later, you just put it in the constructor code, like initialization of databases, initialization of resources, and so on. Okay. And the other thing is now you can do a debugging session and see how these things are happening. For example, you can have a debug point. You know how to add a debug point, right? Maybe another debug point here. Now you can say right click and say debug. And see whether the constructors are getting called. Now we are in this line. Now I will say step in. Okay, step in. Where is my code? Right, you can see I will say step in because I want to see where the constructor is getting. Now this line, still this line is not executed. You can see I will say step in. So now they are initializing the class variables. Okay. Now I will say again step in. Now we are in the constructor. You can see. Constructor is called. Now if you look at the console, still nothing. But after this line, the count object is created. So you must experience this. And may experience එක ගන්න බෑ finally එක ඉන්න. හරි? දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ අවුරුදු 20ක් වුණාට පස්සේ බඩ ගන්නවා දැක්කොත් එimhe අහල පාල මිනිස්සු බලයි මුට පිස්සුද කියලා. හැබැයි BID කරන උන්ට එහෙම ලැජ්ජාවක් නැහැ. උන් finally එක ගිහලා hello world ලියන. hello world ලියන. සැලකියුතු පිරිසක්. විදි ලැජ්ජාවක් නැතුව. finally එක ගිහලා database connectivity දාලා application develop කරන්න බෑ. commercial application. එහෙම කරනවා කියන්නේ බිලි ලැජ්ජාවක් නැති කාලා කන්නේ හාල් පාරු. ෆයිනල් ඉයර් ගියාම ඇසෙන්න ඕන ෆයිනල් ඉයර් ස්ටුඩන්ට් කෙනෙක් විදියට. Right. Now let's get back. Now we are setting some attributes. Now even you can see this object. Go to the variables. You can see there's an object called A1. Its account number is 001. Balance is 0. Okay. Now we call the deposit. Once you call the deposit method, balance will be updated to 10,000. Look at this. Okay, I will step in also. Step in. Now we are in the deposit behavior. Deposit instance method. Now still your balance is 0. Okay, because still this line is not executed. Now if you take, I'm coming back to this. Now you can see my account objects balance is 10,000 because we deposit 10,000. Still the account 2 object is not created. This is, you are looking at the memory now. Okay. Now I will go to the second. Still A2 is not created. I will say step in constructor. Now that coming from the second object creation. Okay. So I will say step over. Now you can see After this line, there will be A2 object also. Still not A2 object. Now you can see A1 object is there, A2 object is there. A1 object has account number 001, balance 8,000 because you did the withdrawal also. A2 object, still the account number is not set, balance is not set because still this line is not executed. Now let's execute this. Now my A2 has account number 006. Now you can see that every object gets its own value. That is why we say account number is instance variable. Now after deposit, this balance must be incremented because we deposit for the A2, not for the A1. A1's balance is not going to affect it because deposit is the instance method. Now you can see A2's balance is 5,000 because we deposit 5,000. Now when you say A1 dot account number, it will be 001. A1 dot balance, it will be 8,000. A2 dot account number, it will be 006. A2's balance will be 5,000. Now you know why. Okay. Look at the console. Okay. Now you have changed the interest rate to 003 also. That is a class variable. You can see interest rate is a class variable. 003. Okay. Interest rate. Now you call the greet method, of course. Methods you can't see here because you can see only the variables. And now if you step in, you are in the greet static method. Okay, static method. Now you get out of the static method. Console, now you must have by also. Now you greet from A1 reference variable, A2 reference variable. You are still going to the same method. Okay. And now you are done. Okay. So that experience you must get. සමහර ජීවිතේට ඩීබග් සෙෂන් එකක් කරලා නැහැ. ජීවිතේට කෝඩ් එකක් ලියලා නැහැ. කටපාඩම් කරලා පොත පාඩම් කරලා ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑමින් පාස් වෙලා. හරි? මං කියන්නේ බල්ලෙක්වත් ගණන් ගන්න ආරකයි දැක්කනේ. ඒකක් තියනවා කිව්වනේ. මොකටද ඒක? වැඩ බැරි හාල් පාරුවන්ගේ ඒක. Right. So now I hope you have reasonable understanding about what is class, what is object, what is instance variable, what is class variable, what is instance method, what is class method, what is constructor, right? What is meant by object creation. So this is sort of a complete code with instance variables, class variables, constructor, instance method, class method. Okay, for the method body is not written, just to give you the big picture. And similarly, now you can think of another concept and identify what are the instance variable, what are the class variable, what are the instance method, what are the class methods. Maybe you can code it, write a small test code. That is something you must do. Now, අවුරුදු 3කට පස්සේ බොඩි බිල්ඩින් එකකට යන්න ඕන නේද? ඔයා අද ඉඳලම යන්න එපා ජිම් එකට නේද? කම්පිටිෂන් එකට කලින් දවසේ ජිම් එකට ගිහිල්ලා ඉවරලා ඇඟ හදා ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා හිතනවා. එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. ඒක මේ දවස්වල කරන්න ඕන දේවල්. මේ මාසේ ටාගට් එකක් තියෙනවා, ලබන මාස 6ට ටාගට් එකක් තියෙනවා. ඊළඟ මාස 6ට ටාගට් එකක් තියෙනවා. නැත්නම් අවුරුදු 3ක ගිහිල්ලා කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් සතියෙන් කරන්න බෑ. ඒක නිකන් විකාරයක්. And so this is your full code. This is the code that we already wrote. Okay. Okay. And there are some important things you must understand. Actually, we are done with the object-oriented basics. Okay. So let me explain those things also. Now, when we have a class, say this is my class. So we have instance variables. You have class variables. you have constructor, you have instance method, you have class method. Right? So your any class, these are the five things you can have. What are the five things? Possible five things: instance variables, class variables, constructor, instance method, class method. Now there are things you can do, there are things you can't do. These are the things you can do. Okay? Can do. Can do කියන්නේ කරාට best practice එක නොවෙන්න පුළුවන්. But if you can, theoretically, I will say can. Okay? So one thing is your instance method have access to the instance variables. ඔන්න එකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්. Instance methods have access to the instance variables. And instance method have access to the class variable. Okay? And your instance method can call other instance methods. Okay? So then your constructor can access class variables. Your constructor can access instance variable. And your constructor can call instance methods. I forget to mention your instance methods can call class methods also. Okay? Your constructor can call instance method and your constructor can call class methods as well. Then what about the class methods? Class methods cannot access instance method because you say that it's a class method. So therefore, class method can access only class variables. And class method cannot call instance method or constructor because instance method can call instance variables. So your class method saying I am not changing the instance variables. So therefore, if you say you don't change the instance variable, you are not supposed to call instance method. Okay. But class method can call some other class methods. So these are the things you can do. Okay, these are the things you can do. Anything else you can't do. Make නැති කිසිම දෙයක් පාඩ කරන්න බෑ. For example, you can't do something like this. මේක නැති ඕන දෙයක් කරන්න බෑ හරි. For example, class method cannot call instance method. මේවා කරන්න බැරි ප්‍රසිද්ධ දේවල්. කරන්න බෑ. I think කරන්න බැරි වගේ දෙයක් නෑ. නමුත් නිකන් අඳිමු. මේවා කරොත් එහෙම වැරදි. errors එනවා. Your instance method try to call a constructor because constructor is supposed to call only at the object creation time. Your class method try to call the constructor. No, not possible. Your class method try to access instance variable. These are ප්‍රසිද්ධ බැරි දේවල්. but නිකන් හිතෙන්න පුළුවන් කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කරන්න බෑ. කරන්න බැරි වෙන හේතුවක් කියන්න ඕනේ. Why? I told you the beautiful word in this world is why. So then you must tell me why. කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන්? මට කියන්න පුළුවන්ද මේක ඇයි? Anyone? Can you explain why this is not allowed? If you try to do this, you will get a compiler. That is your class method accessing instance variable. Anyone? Simple answer. Your instance method can call instance variable, but class method cannot call instance variable. Or call means refer, read or change. Can anyone tell me why? Because class method means it's class level method. Otherwise, you could have made it instance method. So when you say it's a static method, you promise that I will not access instance variables. That is what is meant by having the static keyword. So now when you have already promised that I don't touch instance variable, how do you access instance variable? So then that will collapse the concept. So why this is not allowed? Because when you say this is a class method, you promise that I don't access instance variable. But if you call instance method, that instance method access instance variable. So that means you are indirectly try to access instance variable. That is not allowed. So why can't your instance method call constructor? Anyone? Why? Can someone tell me why? Why can't instance method call constructor? Simple answer is because no one is answering. When you write something in the constructor, you promise saying this is called only at object creation time. That is your promise. That is why you put it into the constructor. Now, instance method, anyone can call at any time. So if your instance method call constructor, that means at later time also you are calling the things that you are supposed to do only at the object creation time. ඒක හරියට ඉපදිච්ච වෙලාවේ කරන්න තිබිච්ච වැඩේ දැන් අවුරුදු 20කට පස්සෙත් කරන්න වාට chance එකක් දෙනවා. එහෙම කරන්න දෙන්න බෑ. If therefore instance method cannot call constructor, if you try to do that, you will get error. And similarly, class method cannot call constructor. But constructor can call instance method. Or constructor can call class method, but not the other way. Of course, instance method can call other instance method. But your class method cannot call instance method. And class method can call other class method. මොකද ඒ class method එක promise එකක් දෙන්නේ ඔය instance variable access කරන්නේ නැහැ. So likewise, whether it's allowed or not has a logic. Why it is allowed? Because of this. Why is it not allowed? Because of this. So whatever you learn, ask why. Have that answer. Then in life also, whatever someone asks you to do, ask why. And if there's no reasonable logic, you say, no, I don't do it. I don't know. That is how I do. That is why I have plenty of time in my life. මගේ ජීවිතේ මට සෑහෙන වෙලාව ඉතුරු වෙනවා. මොකද එක එක කියන මගුල් මම කරන්නේ නැහැ. අහනවා ඇයි එහෙම කරන්නේ? හේතුව මොකද්ද? මට තියෙන ප්‍රයෝජනය මොකද්ද? එහෙම මොන හරි ගොන් කතාවක් කිව්වොත් කියන මම එනවා ඒක කරන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. Right. So that's it about the basics of object orientation. Basics. Remember concept called class, concept called object, concept called attributes and behaviors, which are subdivided to instance variables and class variable. Concept called behavior, we subdivided into instance method and class method. Constructor, message passing or object calling behavior of another object. We have done. Okay. Right. So next class, we will look at what is abstraction, what is encapsulation, what is data hiding, what is association, what is inheritance, what is polymorphism. So then we are done because we don't do the advanced things like inversion of control and blah, blah, blah. So now we are pretty much done. More than 50% of object orientation is done because the most critical things are done. Right? Because හැමෝම දන්නේ inheritance එක විතරයි. මේක වැඩි පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නැහැ අපි. Right. So next class, maybe we need 2 more classes to finish object orientation, but make sure today's session you understand, you do some coding. පොඩ්ඩක් රස්සියාදු ගහන්නේ කෝඩ් එකත් එක්ක debug session එකක් කරන්න, debug session 10ක් 15ක් කරන්න. හරි. ඔයාලට හිතෙන මොන හරි කරලා බලන්න කරන්න පුළුවන්ද බැරිද compile errors එනවාද? Right. So that is how you learn it. If you learn object orientation, then because this is not the end of your BIT, right? You have web development in semester 2. Then object-oriented databases are in database management system in semester 3. Then again web development in semester 3. Right? Semester 2 also web development. Semester 3 you need to work with PHP and work with database and so on using object-oriented way. Then enterprise application development in semester 4. So object-oriented system analysis and design in semester 2. Sorry, semester 3. So everywhere object-oriented programming is needed. Object-oriented concepts are required. And when you are doing your final year project, okay? Right, we'll stop at this point. Thank you. You don't have evening class, okay?